Okay, we are good to go. First of all, thank you all for being here this evening. There may have been a little bit of confusion about the advertising for this. We're not exactly sure what happened. We think that the flyer got taken down from the website, but rest assured that, first of all, we appreciate you being here, and we will come back as often as we need to represent this. So, but tonight, you will get the premiere showing of what we call our work in progress presentation. For those of you that I haven't met already, my name is Dana Little, and I'm the Urban Design Director for the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. And our Executive Director, Tom Lanahan, is also here this evening. Tom worked with some of you, I think, on Saturday the 5th. For those that don't know, we're a public agency, and our region is 4 counties, which is Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River counties. And I have the honor of running the Urban Design Studio, and we do this type of work. We work exclusively with local governments, helping them do master plans, downtown plans, neighborhood plans, architectural design guidelines, anywhere where planning and urban design and development and architecture intersect. When cities call, we get to do that type of work. So I think, how many of you by show of hands were there on Saturday? I think most of you were there on the 5th. Okay, thank you for attending. As you know, things got a little weird as the week went on, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. Our primary study area, as you probably know, is the St. Lucie County properties north of the Causeway, north of Seaway Drive, which includes the beach, and then the Museum Point Park here. South of Seaway, south of the Causeway, the FPUA and city properties here, where the wastewater treatment plant proper is. And then we were also looking at the large Causeway Cove Marina, which is, including the submerged lands, almost 43 acres. I think it's like 17.25 upland acres. And those are the areas that we were really studying and that we, did our due diligence on and that we focused on Saturday the 5th. Key objectives, as I said, we did a lot of due diligence work for this project, title work, surveys. We conducted a whole number of stakeholder interviews. Some of you were part of that process. We have a real estate market study that's underway, although Tom Lavash, our economist, did present that Saturday, some of the initial findings, and I'm going to go over those briefly again this evening. We conducted the 5-day Charrette starting October 5th. We made it to the 5th day, barely, and I'll go over some of that. And then we are now in the process of, presenting back to you the first time what we heard that Saturday, and then the work that we've done since then to develop those ideas so that we can put together drawings and data and analysis and renderings that tell that story. And tonight's an opportunity for you to say, yes, you got it, or no, we need to go back to the drawing board. And that's really what tonight's about. I want to thank all the commissioners and the mayor who was there with us on Saturday, October 5th. Our host committee, and unfortunately she's not here this evening. I made the terrible mistake of leaving Doris Tillman's name off this list during the charrette, but Pamela Carithers, Glenda Cavalcanti is here this evening, Amanda Geller, Mike McCarty, Stan Sinkowski, who said he might be here. He's the one who hosted us at 500 Orange. Doris and Christopher Whiting. Mr. Whiting's here with us as well. And then Cheyenne and Willie and Kev Freeman and Linda Cox. 3 of you are here. Thank you very much for all of your help. Also, your redevelopment staff, hosting us for the interviews. The process prior to the charrette, we had 3 host committee meetings. They helped us with logistics. Where are we going to stay? Where are we going to eat? What do we need to rent? What type of equipment do we need? And most importantly, getting the word out through all of their contacts. We conducted nearly 40 individual interviews with residents and the commissioners and business owners. There was a whole period of data and analysis collection, as I said, the initial market study findings I'm going to go over this evening. We are still in the early stages of this process. We're not in the beginning stages, but we're not at the end of the beginning yet. And tonight will be, as I said, a chance for us to hear from you and, go back and make any necessary corrections. This just shows a lot of the different outlets and social media outlets where we advertised. And then we also presented, leading up to the charrette, to the Rotary Club. We had coffee with the mayor, Downtown Business Alliance, FPUA Board of Directors and the FPUA Citizens Advisory Committee. So, as I've said a couple times already, tonight's the first opportunity to hear from you all. You like what you see, you don't. What do we need to change? What do we need to discuss further? Are there any other items that we're missing? For those of you that were there, as you know, on Saturday the 5th, we were hosted at 500 Orange. It will go down in my book, after having done over 100 of these, the best studio we've ever had. It was fantastic. And unfortunately, we couldn't stay longer. But it was a fantastic venue. You recall, we started out with an opening presentation. That's Tom Lavash talking about the economics of the project. We spent a few moments talking about just the site and the amazing assets that are on South Beach, you know, the incredible things that are happening, the history of planning in Fort Pierce, which is very strong and still alive, and just what an incredible opportunity this is. And our team was very, very thankful to be here. We also put up some boundaries, if you will. We talked about what some of the zoning designations are. We know that in the South Beach overlay, there's a 45-foot height limit. Per the comprehensive plan, there's a maximum density of 8 units per acre. So these are some things that we wanted to put out to the group before they started planning their own projects, so that would generate some discussion and questions. I also took a moment, I promise not to read all this to you, but there, due to the title work that we did, we were able to discover the deeds that had the reverter clauses as part of the FPUA properties. Basically, in a nutshell, saying that if these are not held in public use and for public purpose, they will revert back to whomever they had before. It could be the state, it may revert back to the county. So what we did, because I've talked to different people who have different ideas about what public purpose might be, we put the question out to you as a group on Saturday the 5th. Please, as the community that's going to live with whatever happens on these parcels, let us know what public purposes or public uses you would like to see. And we had no shortage of ideas. And really, really great input. As you know, if you were there were nearly 80 folks that showed up, worked at 9 different tables. Usually we'll have 4 to 6 tables. We had 9, which was really impressive. We had 9 different plans to work with. You know, here's Jessica from our office working, you know, one of the tables. And everybody did a great job really putting their ideas down on paper. There's Tom working with the table, and Lauren from our team. We had breakfast brought in, we had lunch, and then after lunch, as people worked through lunch, we asked that each of the tables present their ideas back to the rest of the group. Now, for some, that's kind of intimidating. Not everybody likes to speak in public, but everybody did a great job. It was a lot of fun, and we start to see from table to table to table threads of consistency. And that's really what we're looking for. You know, you're always going to get somebody who says, well, what we need to do is pave it and turn it into a parking lot or something silly. And we filter through those ideas. But when we start to hear the same ideas over and over again, especially from 9 different tables of 9 different groups, that's really helpful for us as a team. So we had all of the plans up on the wall during the course of the week so that we could constantly check back and see what each of the tables had discussed, what had they presented. And so this is by no means a full list of all of the ideas that we heard, but I wanted to touch on some of them for you. We heard there should be no more than 4 stories. Anybody remember who said that? Okay. We also heard that we should allow for greater than 4 stories in the right location and for the right use, and if there's some form of public benefit. Okay, we heard that from a number of the tables. So, you know, we're triangulating, seeing what we can come up with. Leave the Causeway Park, the South Causeway Park, the beach part, as is. We love it as it is, although a new restroom might be nice, or upgrades to the restroom. That's about all we heard. There's a need for more parking, and I think we've been able to address that in other locations. This was a constant idea through every single table, I believe. Create a continuous pathway from the north side of the causeway south into whatever happens at FPUA and Causeway Cove. And I think we've done a pretty cool job of that. We need more boat parking, boat and trailer parking. And a new boat launch would be great too, because the one that's next door to the aquarium, it's kind of tight. It's hard to get in and out of. There's not parking. That's why you've got trailers parking on the side of the road. So we try to address that. Public uses, that discussion that we had. We'd love to see, now this is just the FPUA site we're talking about. We'd love to see some sort of event center, a lighthouse type tower or observation tower would be great. An amphitheater was almost a universal idea from all the tables. A splash park we heard a few times for kids, or something similar to that. A sailing club structure, we had a lot of mariners there. And then we had the usual Ferris wheel idea. And that always generates, interesting discussion. Mixed use in restaurants, particularly on the Causeway Cove side as it redevelops, would be desirable. And we also heard about the Tahitian honeymoon suites. That's not an official name, but I'll go over that with you. It's an interesting idea. I think that Mr. Smith has probably been promulgating for a number of years at this time. But somebody finally drew it for him. So a hotel somewhere in the Causeway Cove area with event space. As we were doing the interviews, I kept hearing, we need a convention center. And I'm thinking, I live next door in West Palm Beach to a 500,000 square foot convention center. I don't think that's what we're talking about. Finally, I got to the bottom of it, really about a 20,000 square foot sort of event type of space as part of the hotel, so that you could have reunions and gatherings and different types of functions like that. The hotel should also, ideally, if it could be designed, should have structured parking, some of which could be available to the public, so that we don't have to try to litter the area with parking garages. It seems like too sensitive of an area to litter with parking garages. So if there's one garage attached to a hotel, maybe that could handle some of the overflow necessary parking. We also heard a bit about architecture and scale. We heard a lot about architecture and scale, particularly scale. And that whatever is built, it should have some sort of consistency with the character of Fort Pierce. And we even heard a lot of ideas about Key West, or even in particular Truman Annex, as an idea, as a model to sort of to consider as we design and move forward. But as I said, create meaningful destinations, but that must maintain the character and the scale of the community. So what does that exactly mean? So after that Saturday, you all left probably around 3 o'clock. We quickly turned that space into our design studio. Now, you might remember the Sunday after that Saturday, the weather was torrential. There was a monsoon on Sunday and on Tuesday, and so we didn't have any visitors. We normally will. We did have some visitors on Tuesday, I believe, though, which was great to see. So this is that space transformed. All 10 of us were there working, and as I said, it was the best studio space we've ever had. On Sunday, after going through all the drawings again, we all individually did our own design based upon what we had seen. Okay, and what we had heard. And then we presented them back to each other. We call it a pin-up in architecture school. That's what you call it. Where we pinned up our own drawings. And then just like you all did on Saturday, we did the same thing on Sunday with the design team. But taking the information that we had gleaned from you and trying to put it to scale, make sure circulation works, where can parking go. So that goes from a sort of bubble diagram that you all created on Saturday, which was so important, to something that's a little more precise and we can measure. I had to put this up there, and I thought twice about it because, while it was funny and it was an interesting experience. People lost their lives. A lot of people, suffered great damage. We were monitoring this storm very carefully, starting on probably Sunday. We weren't sure what was going to happen. It was ramping up. We had team members from the west coast of Florida, from Orlando. Tom Lavash, our economist, was worried that he was not going to be able to get out of West Palm Beach, flying back to Massachusetts. So we actually had some team members that had to leave 1 or 2 each day. So we didn't have the full team for the entire week. 3 of us remained to the end of the charrette. But we did send them home with homework. The work didn't stop then. So even though we had to leave the studio that we didn't want to leave, and I hope all of you were okay with those tornadoes. Nothing like we've ever seen before. So as we emptied the studio, everybody got homework assignments, and as I said, we continue to work on this, and will continue to work on this going forward. I'm going to quickly go through Tom Lavash's presentation very quickly, not the full thing, but really Tom Lavash on the left and Tom Moriarty. Tom Moriarty could not join us on Saturday, but Tom Lavash on the left presented the market findings, and I'm just going to touch on those real quickly. So the question is, why do a market study? And Tom likes to bullet point this, ensure that the master plan, meaning the work that the planners and architects are doing, is grounded in reality. He likes to rub that in. You know, you guys fancifully design stuff, and oftentimes it's not grounded in the economic market reality. So they are really important to our team to make sure that we don't ever want to give unrealistic expectations and say all of this can be designed and beautiful, and yet there may not be a market to support it. So this helps check us off. As far as retail goes, they are very conservative. They're suggesting that for this area, our study area, maybe an additional 15 to 20,000 square feet could be supported. That's probably 3 to 5 restaurants maybe, or a few shops, which is, I think, perfectly fine with what we've come up with. There's a strong market for hotels, no surprise. And they think conservatively that citywide there's up to 300 rooms that could be supported today. Tom even mentioned that under the right conditions, maybe even a third hotel could be supported, but certainly there's a market for up to 300 rooms. The question is, where do they go? There is citywide in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, a market for over 800 new multifamily units citywide. And then paring that down to the study area that we were looking at, they feel that there's a market within that study area, and we're talking primarily about Causeway Cove, of 175 to about 225 units. And that's just multifamily. So that's a pretty strong market for a small study area. And we use this going back and forth, you know, as we were developing the master plan over the course of the week. So what I'm going to do now is quickly go through the plan. I'm going to show the plan in its entirety and then try to zero in on different quadrants and sectors and show you some of the designs and renderings that we've come up with and some of the numbers, some of the analysis as well. So this is the master plan that we've developed. And if I can get my pointer to work, basically, as you know, north is up, Museum Point Park is here. What we show is the causeway coming down, and then we've got a cut line here, which means that you can see what's underneath the bridge there, because we designed a lot of stuff underneath the bridge. And then this cut line here is where you see the causeway pick up again. This is the FPUA city parcel piece over here, and then you can barely see it, but this dotted line is the property line, and then this is all of Causeway Cove. So if we look at the beach for starters, because that's where the least amount of action is happening. As I mentioned earlier, you know, our study area only went to the edge of the beach here, the eastern edge, and we heard loud and clear, please leave it alone. We love it the way it is. You know, maybe clean out the trash cans a little bit more and maybe spruce up the restroom. But that was kind of about it. If there's a way to squeeze another parking space or two in there, fine, but we certainly don't want to pave anything, and we really don't want to change the character of that. And we're okay with that. You know, we're not here to force any changes. And it is such a lovely place. You know, it's so unique. I grew up in Miami, and it reminds me when you used to go out to Key Biscayne, when you were on Dinner Key, you know, people would just kind of line up right off the side of the causeway there, and it was always, you know, it's not formal, but it's fun. So the next area that we looked at is Museum Point Park. We had a few more recommendations here. We heard the idea about maybe if there's a need to expand part of the aquarium. We're still trying to have a meeting with the aquarium folks to find out if that's really something that they want us to pursue. But we did not hear from anybody that either the museum or the aquarium, at least I don't recall, that they needed to move anywhere else, that they were happy living where they were. And in fact, I didn't realize this, but this big building that's here that houses the majority of the museum is actually one of the original naval base buildings that's still there. So it's probably pretty solid. What we did here, though, is that this is that existing boat launch or boat ramp that's kind of challenging to get in and out. There's not really turnaround. There's not parking spaces big enough. So, we thought about that. And we also looked at, so here's the boat ramp there. And the discussion that we had was, should it be limited to smaller vessels or maybe even just restricted to non-motorized vessels? Two ideas. There was another idea about just getting rid of it and expanding the beach. We talked about that quite a bit, but we thought, that's a lot of infrastructure to just get rid of, and it might have unintended consequences with the parking and all of that, because you do need the parking for the museum. So, this is something that's worth discussing going forward, but there was, even if this remains, or as it remains, there was definitely a recommendation to have an additional boat launch area with associated parking. And the only thing we really heard about the museum itself is that it is kind of surrounded in chain link and things like that, and that maybe there's a more elegant way to provide privacy and security, for the museum. But that was really it for those two. However, this is Lauren from our office. Her daughter's school were actually here last week, taking a field trip to the museum and to the aquarium. And they were utilizing, of course, this really wonderful waterfront promenade or multi-purpose pathway. That was what folks were dialing in on. We would love to see this be continuous. So as we develop the master plan, and I hope you can see this, the master plan is kind of ghosted in underneath. This shows an entire, there would be sidewalks included, making sure that there's safe pedestrian crossings, picking up the existing pathway here, working it all the way around, and it sort of terminates somewhere in here. And then crossing at this point in a safe way, because this is where we're recommending the new boat launch go on the north side of the causeway, and then continue down across over the water away from the power substation, the transfer station, because that's not moving. We made that clear on Saturday as well. But actually create this entire 1.5 mile loop all the way around to the point and then back up. And then I'll detail some of these things out for you later. But there was a concentrated effort to make sure that these connections happened so that as each person designed their little area, we made sure that we had space to put in the promenade all the way around. So we were really happy with the way this turned out. There's the area under the causeway, which is completely underutilized. It's kind of interesting, but kind of, sketchy at the same time. And this is a very important area because where I'm standing right here, no, I'm sorry. This is the north side. Where I'm standing, if I were to turn around, that's the fishing pier right there. On the south side. On the north side over here is where the new boat ramp would go. But there's lots of opportunity. And, I'm going to show you an image in a moment. A lot of cities are starting to wake up and say, whoa, we have all of this unused, derelict space underneath our overpasses and stuff. Why don't we turn them into cool things? Some cities have made skateboard parks. They've turned them into plazas, all kinds of cool stuff. So this is that plan. This is the master plan in detail. And I'll show you, this is the causeway coming down. And again, we stop it here so that we can see underneath the bridge. And then, so what you have here are about 18 to 20 diagonal boat trailer parking spaces. They have direct access to a new boat launch just here on the north side of where the causeway piers are. These little dots, those are the existing columns. So we had to work within that column-based structure. This area here, come on, guy. This area here shows a series of diagonal just regular vehicle parking spaces, and we think we can get about 50 more parking spaces just here for vehicles. Plus, we've got on-street parking, parallel parking, all the way along here and all the way along the south access. This ability to circulate underneath the causeway is a huge benefit for both the north and south side of these areas. You know this. If they can be designed and formalized in a way that they behave a little bit better and that they're activated, they could be very, very beneficial. I also showed down here, and I was going to go over this in a little bit, here's the substation, and then we also picked up another surface parking lot down here, but I'll talk about that in a moment. And then you'll see here these two towers. This is a luxury item, I get it, but one of the things that we heard about is, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could add on a 10 or 12 foot, almost a clip-on sort of pathway onto the causeway itself. Because right now you've only got this tiny little 4-foot sidewalk on either side, and people brave it. You see them out there doing it, but anybody who walked it that I've talked to says it's not a very pleasant experience. So that's another way of getting people from the mainland to this destination. So we designed a couple towers that would be able to capture those and then give you vertical circulation down. This will identify all of this is a reminder to tell me all the things I just told you. But this area here, like I said, where the vehicular parking is on either side, we think could become a very cool spot for some sort of plaza type of treatment. And I'll show you some examples of that too. Last thing is, there was a lot of discussion, and I didn't mean to intentionally leave it off my list in the beginning, but I knew we'd come back to it. There's a lot of discussion about traffic concerns, congestion concerns. During certain holidays or certain great weekends, the traffic backs up all the way to the causeway. And I don't doubt that that's the case. I don't know that you're ever going to be the amazing beachfront, waterfront destination that you are and have no traffic problems. Every place that's worth going to has traffic problems. However, how you manage it, needs to be done smartly and not based upon just pure emotion. So we discussed a lot of different ways of addressing this connection, because if you're going to start, looking at development and intensifying things in Causeway Cove, you're going to have to address the traffic concerns. So just so you know, and here we chose for the time being to show another roundabout. We heard some folks that love the roundabout that exists and other folks that hate it. And that's common in most places. After all these years of roundabouts in South Florida, some people still don't know how to use them. But that's all right. They don't know how to use stop signs either. Thank you, blinkers. That's my big one. But what we have done, though, since the Charrette during that week, we've engaged an engineering firm who's I'm meeting with tomorrow, actually, and they're going to assist us with a traffic analysis. What are the best ways to circulate in and out of these two sites? We know that coming left to go to the west or left to go to the east, crossing that is treacherous. We experienced that many times. So they're going to help us with the entryway design, sort of analyze what we've come up with, give us their best recommendations, traffic counts, as well as some of the mobility options. So we're looking into that, and that's going to be almost its own little chapter, I think, in our report about how to handle this. This is a cross-section through the bridge, through the causeway. And I show you this because we were testing how much parking we could fit underneath the bridge, how much parking we could fit on the sides within the right-of-way, which is about 116, 120 feet. This is a cross-section through the structure of the bridge itself. This, and I'll show you a detail of this in a moment, is the idea of actually fastening to the side of the bridge a wider, expansive sidewalk / promenade. Here's a detail of that. This shows it at about 12 feet. It can actually be done in a really beautiful way. This is rendered almost as sort of an Art Nouveau type of metal painted green type of thing. But also that would give you some space to add lighting and just make this a safer condition. I talked to many people who lived on the island who do bike and ride or run back and forth. And, to have an extra buffer there would be great. In addition to that, oh, I'm jumping back and forth. This is looking underneath the causeway again at the trailer parking, and we actually did a rendering of lots of trucks and trailers. And I just felt that I should point out to you that this guy's license plate says Milton. What's that? Milton for the hurricane. But it's, formalizing that area underneath and being able to use it for a new boat ramp could be great. The idea of the plaza, I wanted to point out to you again, that's this area. And we've been working with FDOT and other cities with enhancing FDOT and the MPOs in different cities, metropolitan planning organizations, to look at ways to enhance this. This is a project that's under development right now. It's called the Canopy in Orlando. This is actually I-4, which, as you know, is a mega highway. And they've transformed this, or they plan to transform this cavernous space into something that's well-lit, active, and could have festival type of activities, etc. Now, this is way out of scale, for what you guys would have, but the ideas, I think, are still kind of interesting to pursue. Well-lit underside of the, even the Roosevelt Bridge, or the bridges in Stewart, the south one, I forget which one it is that goes out to Sewell's Point, but I think it has sort of, or it goes out to the beach, has an area underneath that's well-lit, and it's sort of a plaza type treatment. So there's all sorts of examples that you can look at these days, but we think that that could be a very interesting place that could be safe and actually provide a nice resting spot or destination between the north side and the south side. This is that tower. This is pretty elaborate. We tried to dial in on some nautical themes, but the idea is that it would capture that new walkway and then give you the ability to go up and down. And then this is just some of the initial design sketches of that. It could have an elevator. You'd probably have to. Or, the walkway could continue. And then that wouldn't be the only way to get down. So Causeway Cove Marina, this section of the presentation is going to focus just on that area immediately east of the FPUA. So here we are, back to our master plan again. We're going to focus just on this area here, and there's some key components that I want to point out. So here's a detail. This is the entry here where the roundabout would be. This is the existing boat ramp and launch that's out there today. This is where all the rental boats and such are stored back there. There were a number of key concepts that came out of this, and I'm going to try to walk through each one of them. Number one, and I'm going to back up again, but number one is that we wanted to make sure that whatever we were showing here was built upon a system of streets and blocks, so that there were many, many ways to get from one place to another. That helps disperse traffic. It makes it much more walkable. When you're in a city that has smaller blocks and lots of streets, it makes those streets much more walkable. If you've only got one street that has to carry all of your traffic, or two, that street has to get bigger and bigger and bigger to carry the volume. If you can disperse it through lots of little streets are much more friendly to pedestrians and cyclists. So this is really important. So we illustrated this diagram just to show the street network. You've got a primary promenade here along the waterfront. You've got a central, or this is the main axis here that I'll show you in a moment, has a park-like condition all the way to open up that view. We heard about that on Saturday the 5th, that, boy, there's a project next door that sort of blocked all the view of the water from Seaway Drive, and wouldn't it be great if whatever we did here kept open view corridors to the water and the marina? And then this road here is sort of what defines the edge of the private development and then the public area here. So again, here's the master plan. This is the street network. This street comes in. I'm kind of fond of this, comes in, and then it does this little pinwheel motion. So it sets you up on axes with the entrance, the primary entrance to the parkway over here. So you end up with a little park there and a little park there. And then these would be primarily residential. These would be primarily mixed use with some of those restaurants and things. So we're going to look at the hotel piece here, because the hotel is justified up here by the causeway. And it's a pretty intense program that I want to go over, as well as the marine service area. And we're calling it, for the time being, Causeway Cove Village. We're welcome to give that to anybody if they want it. So here's the hotel site. So if you can see my cursor, if you come in off the causeway, you can enter here and go to sort of drop off. There would be sort of a park-like condition, a greenway condition that extends all the way down to the water's edge. And then you can circulate through this little side street into a structured parking area back here. The parking area would be a few levels with amenity deck on top, pool and, whatever. And then you would be able to exit the garage here and then exit back out to go right here, or exit back out the way you came to circle around and then head out west if that's what you desire to do. The idea is that this building here, this part of the hotel, the primary portion of the hotel, would be taller than everything else in the area. We are recommending that, and what we drew is that this portion of the building facing the causeway would be, we've illustrated as like 6 and 7 stories. Keep in mind the height limit is like 4 stories. But everything else we've drawn is 2 to 3 stories, because we wanted to test what is the density, what's the capacity that we could eke out of just 2 to 3 story buildings. So I'll go over that in a moment. But the idea is that, the mixed use sort of shops and bait shops and that type of environment would continue down, and the back of that would be a marine service area, so that a lot of the boats and things that are happening already there today could remain, but just be sort of concealed and contained, so that you've got the face of the village here, shops and all that kind of stuff, but then the guts of the village back here, where the boat rentals and all that can be. And then the dockmaster's building would be right here, kind of where it currently sits. That's the idea. So what we've shown for the hotel is about 120 rooms, a 20,000 square foot event type of center space that I talked about, 6 to 7 stories along Seaway, but then immediately drops down to 3 stories here in this area, 2 to 3 stories. And then, as I said, the marine service area plus structured parking. And as I mentioned before, part of the idea of structured parking is that in exchange, for allowing a building to go taller in this location, I mentioned before, some sort of meaningful public benefit. That could come in the form of publicly available parking spaces. It could also come in the form of the character and scale of the rest of the development. And that's what I want to talk about next. Here's an illustration of that hotel. This is just an elevation. If you were on Causeway Cove, looking at it, this is the tallest component. This is 6 stories here and then a little 7-story piece there. Now you see it gets much thinner if you're coming across Causeway Cove heading to the east. It's just this sort of tower piece that's that tall. Now, you could do this different ways. You could turn it the other way so that the long face of the building is not facing Causeway Cove. The shorter end of the building could face Causeway Cove. So it could be configured in a lot of different ways. We just wanted to illustrate something that we thought kind of matched what we heard. We didn't hear complete consensus, but maybe there's a way to exchange a little bit of height for the hotel for other benefits. And then this is a rendering just showing what that might look like. This is obviously in a Mediterranean type of architecture. It could be in any other style that's deemed suitable. But what I was suggesting is that if this is too long of a face facing Seaway Drive, that piece could get flipped so that this short end could be what's facing Seaway as opposed to the long face. This is meant to be a point of discussion going forward. And by the way, staff hasn't seen any of this. Nobody has seen any of this. Only me. So I'm going to describe some other areas of the village itself. This promenade that's here, we thought could be a really beautiful way to provide not only access but activity to the marina. There's there's few things as cool as sitting in a place where there's a marina there and you can actually have a lunch or a dinner or whatever else, hear the boats, hear the sounds. And so we thought that there was a way to have an informal sort of natural edge that's there in some locations, a more formal sort of super wide promenade like you have downtown, on the water's edge, and then a series of new buildings here that would be between 2 to 3 stories, that would be mixed use with some residential above and then shops and restaurants below. So a view of that looking to the west is here. So you see this is that new road that comes in, and then this is clearly a sort of Key West and beach character type of architecture. This shows 3 stories with a little 4-story tower, but like I said, the calculations that I'm going to share with you in a moment are predicated upon doing only 2- and 3-story buildings, not even maximizing the 4-story height that's allowed there today. So this is a view looking towards the FPUA site where all of the public amenities are. And then and then as I mentioned earlier, there was this idea about the water, what do we call them? Overwater suites. That's the Tahitian village thing that I mentioned earlier. So we actually drew those in. And, and Buzz Smith was there. And I asked him, I said, Buzz because he's mentioned this to me before. And I said, well, are you concerned about the marina activity conflicting with any of that? And he's like, no, I don't think that'd be a problem. So we decided to render that too. So again, it could take on any sort of, architectural character or style, but we think it's a really interesting idea that would be so unique to this location. I don't know of anywhere else in Florida where something like this exists. And, the guy who runs the marina is the one who came up with the idea. By the way, another idea that came up, not at every table, but in talking to Mr. Smith about it, though, is this idea of a breakwater. We think, and it would be off the page here, we think that would be a great idea if it's warranted and protects, the investments that are made there. We didn't know how to draw it, so we didn't. I didn't want to put it in the wrong location and draw it incorrectly, but I want to put on the record that we heard and acknowledge that that's, potentially a very valuable piece of infrastructure for this whole area. So as I mentioned, Causeway Cove Village, I put it in quotes, 2- to 3-story buildings throughout, except for the hotel piece right here. Everything is meant to be 2 to 3 stories, either multifamily, mixed use, or there are some townhouse buildings. And I'm going to show you an example of one of those in a moment. We have a total of 227 dwelling units that fit in 2 to 3 stories. And we calculate those by taking the total square footage and dividing by 1,200 square feet per unit. And that allows for some bigger units. Here's what it allows for: vertical and horizontal circulation, but it also allows for flexibility in some bigger units and some smaller units. So not every unit would be 1,200 square feet. Some could be smaller, some could be bigger. There might be bigger units that would be desirable. But we're just trying to find out conceptually at this point, what's a yield in a scale that seems to be acceptable to the community. So with the 35 townhouses, those would be little 3-story walk-up townhouse types. We've got a total of 262 dwelling units here. Now, as I said, currently the property is limited to 8 units per acre, okay, per the comprehensive plan. We think a strategy to entice whoever develops this to do a lower scale, more village type of development is that give them density in exchange for height, in exchange for reducing the height, and in exchange for character, because that's really, really important. And also, we think we can get about 15,000 square feet of retail and restaurants along these buildings here that I talked about a moment ago and that we had the renderings for. I wanted to show this to you. This is a project in Palm Beach County, and these are townhouse types. And so I thought we'd take a little test here. So can you tell me how many stories these buildings are? 3. And we know that because we can what? Count the windows, right? That's pretty straightforward. What's the density, do you think? Anybody have an idea? How many units per acre? It's kind of a trick question because you'll never know. You'll never know the density because you don't know how big those units are, or you don't know what the unit mix is. This could be 10 units per acre, or it could be 40 units per acre. There's no way to really tell. Now, the particular density of this project is 24 units per acre. That exceeds what we sketched out almost by a third. And so, I don't know, I think that personally, and I'd love to hear from you this evening, this is a scale and a character that might make great sense for Causeway Cove, especially if it's arranged in a street and block pattern, and it's very walkable, and it's also accompanied with mixed uses. But I wanted to give that little test because density is a funny thing. You know, it's not as easy to pick out as a building height. All right, so finally we're coming around the corner. We're going to focus on the FPUA and city piece. Public elements on public property. That was kind of the mandate that we've gotten as of 1940 and as of October 5th of this year. So we're going to be focusing just on the FPUA area. As I mentioned before, this area in white, is the existing power station. We tried as much to conceal it behind landscaping, backup parking to it, landscaping here, and then our continuous, come on guy, our continuous promenade actually comes off of the shore a bit here. Okay, didn't want to do that yet. So anyway, you'll see this continuous promenade that comes down here. This area is expanded to allow for, congregation of folks because we think this would be a great water taxi launch. How cool would it be to be able to connect to the downtown marina with this site, with a water taxi? Yet another fun way to get, over to some activities. So that's what that is. And then we've got park space, and I'll go through these different details here. So number one here is the existing power station. Number two is the water taxi launch area. Number three, all of this green, these are passive parks. There's some trails in there, lots of landscaping, native landscaping, some outdoor pavilions, not unlike what's happening on the north side, a restorative sort of passive place. As you come down here to what we call the point, this would be an event pavilion coupled with a small observation tower and maybe like the Sunset Plaza or something. Really take advantage of this this is a 270-degree water view right there. Number 5 up here, I mentioned earlier, is a public parking area, and we calculate we can get about 150 spaces there just for vehicles. So between this parking area and the one up here by the plaza, I think we're looking at about 175, nearly 200 new parking places, including the trailer parking, just underneath the causeway and then backed up right next to the causeway. Number 6 here, I don't know if you can see it well, but there's like a little median here that's intended to be a sort of pull off and drop off for the park. The park area has its own little gate entry, not a gate for security, but a monumental sort of gate because you're entering a special civic space. We thought, wouldn't it be fun? And we heard a little bit about this. This could be a fountain or even a splash pad or a splash park. We had talked about that with some shade structures, sort of a pavilion that wraps around just to provide shade while parents are sitting there baking. But that would actually, and this, by the way, this is getting a little planner wonky, but this entry to the gate is right on axis with that central street. So you can see it from the center of the project. It takes on a location of prominence and presence. The whole splash pad sort of structure would back up to what would be a new amphitheater, outdoor amphitheater. That back-to-back relationship is very important. We talked about it a little bit on Saturday. Every place, every function, homes have backs, most buildings have backs. You want to have a back-to-back relationship. You don't want the back of the amphitheater stage to be a prominent feature. So by backing those two up together, we actually, for lack of a better term, kill two birds with one stone. We've only got fronts now, but fronts of different uses. So this is the amphitheater, as I just mentioned. And then as you travel down this pathway, I love this. This we thought would be a great spot where the sailing club structure could go. There's actually a natural beach that's here, and this would be an easy way to get for portage for the sailing boats, as well as kayaks or whatever non-motorized vessels might be there. So that would be that. And then also this drop-off area that I just mentioned, it has a dual function in that, you know, we figured, gosh, you're probably going to want to have some sort of loading, you know, for the sailing club. You know, you don't want to have to park your car 3 blocks away and then drag your sunfish all the way there, or whatever else it might be. So there's a way to actually engage the sailfish, the sailing club with a little drop-off and loading area. But this central sort of spine, this curvilinear walkway, now takes you all the way down to what would be this event pavilion. And also, as I said before, you can clearly see here the continuous walkway and promenade that goes all the way around the property. And as I said, if you were so inclined, you could do a full 1.5 mile loop all the way around and be protected virtually most of the way. So we're going to take a quick look of what the amphitheater might look like. By the way, we argued mightily as a team. We've got some real rigid classicists who say, no, the Greeks, you know, they oriented their amphitheater. Well, we researched and they were wrong. But obviously you don't want to be looking into the sun if you're, you know, that's the thing. It's kind of like orienting a tennis court. But what we thought, though, is that with this orientation, there could be evening lighting, which could be nice. The audience is not looking into the sun. And you could even more boats off of here to be part of an offshore participation. You know, you could actually take a little boat over and listen to whatever was happening there. So anyhow, we have a little rendering of what that might look like. The amphitheater would be, we saw it as being terraced, but pervious, not paved. One of the things that's really important about this entire site and this approach, we think, is that at least 80% of what we've drawn is pervious surface. It will absorb water. You know, we're going to have to contend with, you know, rising sea levels, worsening storms, etc. And so one way to, at a conceptual point to start to think about that is the more pervious area we can have, especially here. But this is looking towards the amphitheater, and then you see the village beyond. This is a 3-story building here and a 3-story building there. So there's actually almost a distinction, and I don't want to go crazy with this example, but if you've ever been in New York, you've got an urban edge, and then you've got the Central Park edge. Again, that's a wild example, but it is distinct. You know, that your village stops here, it's well connected, but the village stops here and the park begins there. And then so finally, the observation tower or the point, we've had lots of discussions about what character this could be. It could take on any character that's appropriate. We had discussed, you know, potentially like a lighthouse type of theme, but we think that you could integrate whatever sort of tower feature there is with some small event type of, whether it's like an outdoor space or something, because you can imagine maybe getting married at a location like this. Since it's at the point, you know, we illustrated it as being raised up a few steps. But you can imagine having a wedding here, proceeding down along the walkway, and then having a procession down the promenade and take you right to the hotel. You know, so the honeymoon. Oh, the honey. Well, yeah. Well, only 2 are stopping off there, hopefully. The rest of us got to walk back to the event center. But you get the idea that you can have these really great functions adjacent to really pastoral spaces, we think. So our next steps. The hope is to get some input tonight, preferably positive, but it's entirely up to you. And then what we hear, we're going to go back to the offices and continue to work on this. We are in the process of developing a three-dimensional model, computer model of this, so that you can really understand the scale. I think it's very important to understand the scale. You know, when you think about 3 stories and this amount of land and how it's assembled, it would be very helpful to get more visualization of what that village and that scale might look like. I know I've intertwined policy and art here, but they have to go hand in hand, because you can't sign off or feel comfortable about a rendering if it's not going to work from a policy perspective, and that's very important. We'll continue to review this or start reviewing this with staff. As I said, they haven't seen it yet. Our goal, our schedule is to deliver the first draft of the master plan report, which will take all of this information, the public outreach, summary of interviews, the full market study, which our economists always like to brag, they're about 128 pages long. You're welcome to read all of it. And we'll come back with a draft in January or February, and then we'll begin our final presentations to the community in the spring. So thank you very, very much for being here. And but I do appreciate the positive comments and the input. And I'm really glad that we brought a traffic engineer on board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.